Every year, we learn about the struggles of our ancestors. But what about what Black people are doing today? Of course, it's important to remember the past, but it's also important to look how far we've come. Jordan Peele swept the nominations for the biggest awards at the Oscars for Get Out, a parody of Black relations in America. Ryan Coogler and Marvel's Black Panther continues to break box office records even before its February 16th release, having the highest selling pre-sale tickets for the superhero movie, and is set to break Marvel's opening weekend box office record. TV show hitmaker Shonda Rhimes struck a multi-year, multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix that will go down as one of the largest deals in the streaming service's history. Me Too movement founder Tarana Burke finally got her flowers as one of the first to speak out against sexual assault. The National Museum of African American History and Culture opened in Washington, D.C. and received more than 1 million visitors in its first 4 months. College graduation rates among African Americans have nearly doubled in the past 20 years, with 23% of all African Americans earning college degrees. Black entrepreneurship is soaring, with businesses owned by Black women alone pulling in $51.4 billion in revenue. And even though the Obamas are out of the White House, they've still been making rounds on television and social media, so we don't have to miss them too much. And Will Smith joined Instagram. In an age when Black Lives Matter needs to be said as if someone thinks otherwise, when Nazis are a thing that we have to worry about again, and when civil rights are being threatened daily, it's nice to remember that Black people are flourishing in every.
Greetings upon greetings, and welcome to another week here on Here to Help You. I are Dave Rankin at the controls, and as you can see, I'm all by myself just for a little bit. Of course, my divine she's away. Wow, that's brand new for me. I see. Thank you so much for putting the lower third for me. I'm so surprised. I'm very much surprised in regards to how the slow changes that happens here. But you know, when it does take place, it looks to go ahead and enhance, of course, our credibility amongst our viewers. Today's show is going to be a wonderful show. As I mentioned before, of course, every week came on board, especially with our guest today, that it is a rare treat when we have someone who comes into our studios, right, who is an actual fan. Normally, when people do come in, by means, you know what, of course, they've watched 1 or 2 shows, right, but they don't really get a chance to go ahead and then express how much they've enjoyed the shows, let alone, of course, you know, coming on to go ahead and actually promote exactly their services or product. But today, we definitely have a wonderful show lined up for y'all. And in fact, you know what, let me get into my script before I get a phone call saying I ain't following the notes. So, in the honor of honoring Africans living in the diaspora who are in action this week, we have a very special gift for you, and it comes in the form of wisdom. Elder Errol Gibbs was born in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, West Indies. He's a friend and husband to Marjorie. They currently live in Milton, Ontario. They have nurtured 5 children, and all of them who function in semi-professional and professional careers in engineering, social justice, public health, and management. Errol obtained a highly engaged polytechnic engineering education before immigrating to Canada in 1969. I tell you, the 60s, it really spearheaded a prolific movement all over the world. And I'm sure we get a chance to go and speak about it at some point in time as well. However, though, regarding the education, he has been educated in certified scientific engineering technology, or CET, and as well as project management professionalism. Elder Errol is a former employee of the Ontario Power Generation, right, on thermal as well as nuclear divisions. In 1997, he moved to the United States and joined the management and business consulting firm, the PCI Group, as the resident scientific technologist and senior process designer. He's written and co-presented several white papers entitled Manufacturing Engineering, Project Office, a link to supplier integration at a global conference on project management in Houston, Texas. Leadership, a new leadership perspective, a hierarchical structure of 5 foundations at the International Leaders Association. This was the Global Leadership Conference in San Diego, California. Can we get the picture number 1, please? Perfect. This right here is amazing with the divisions of science and network learning. I believe this is where the I'm going to say the actual conference took place, I believe. However, though, in 2008 as well as 2010, Elder Errol presented at the 17th and 19th Annual Science Symposium, sponsored by Visions of Science Network and Learning. And this took place right here in Toronto, Ontario. He had the privilege to speak on the same circuit as distinguished former NASA astronaut Captain Winston E. Scott and Professor and Dr. Mercedes T. Richards, Department of Astronomy, Astrophysics of Pennsylvania State University. He has been a member of the following organizations: the Institute of Cost Engineers of America, the Professional and Administrative Employees of OPG. He's a current member of the following organizations: a member of the Association of Energy Professionals, member of the International Leadership Association of America, member of the Project Management Institute of America, and as well as the member of the Association of Certified Engineering Technicians and Technologists. He's done a lot. And you know what? I guess we could say, that we're really speaking lightly in regards, of course, to some of his accolades. Of course, when he does come on later on, we get a chance to go ahead and elucidate a little bit more. However, though, some of his recognitions are the following. He's been a distinguished national for his contribution to the Canadian diaspora by the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, West Indies. An ambassador for peace by the Women's Federation for World Peace. Valuable contributor mentoring the Pathway to Leadership Youth Leadership Program by Advancement of Community Development. A community hero by the students of Trent University. A significant contributor assigned to a successful program management by the PCI Group. Right? I mean, the list just continues on. And one of the most recent collaborations with his wife Marjorie was in 2017, where they both written the book Discovering Your Optimum Happiness Index and Discovering Your Optimum Happiness Quotes. It is their way to engage people, communities, and nations in a global dialogue about the positive and far-reaching benefits of happiness that can heal the wounds of mankind and usher in a new era of peaceful coexistence. When we come back, we're going to go ahead and actually begin our conversation with the great Errol Gibbs. We'll see you soon.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Hello, my name is Anisha, and I'm the production manager of TCN Network. Have you ever wanted to host your own show? Do you have a message to share? Well, you're in luck. We are looking for dynamic and unique individuals to host their own shows. We are seeking people who are committed, motivated, and energetic. Do you want to be the next Jimmy Fallon, Ellen DeGeneres, or Shane and Ryan from BuzzFeed Unsolved? Start here. Fill out the Propose a Show form on MyTCNTV.com. We're here to educate, support, and build the community. Can you lead by example? Go the extra mile and seek knowledge? Are you humble, disciplined, responsible, selfless, and enthusiastic? Those are our core values. And if you identify with them, you could be part of a growing network that focuses on positivity and uplifting our community. We can't wait for you to join us on TCN Network and hope to hear from you soon.
Yes, straight ahead. Yes, welcome back to Here to Help You. I'm Dave Rankin, and I'm here with my distinguished guest, Elder Errol Gibbs. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Good to be here with you.
Thank you so much. You know, we were joking, of course, during the break in regards to, of course, everything that you've accomplished. And by means, you know what, like, I'm sure this is just a small picture in regards to what you have accomplished. Time. Let's talk about time. You know, how have you went ahead and amassed such a great body of work?
Well, I wouldn't say time management, but task management.
Task management.
Yeah. First of all, you have to have an interest, of course. You have to have quite objective, have an interest for life, humanity. You have to have the ability to be tenacious and not to give up, pursue goals and objectives. And really, that's what it is. The other thing is not having or leaving a lot of what you call open ends in your life.
Okay.
So if you take on a project, take it to completion. And you could, of course, have overlapping projects. But for every project that you take on, take it to completion. And the other thing is try to take on multiple projects that might be diverse in nature.
Okay.
So that helps to expand your knowledge base, expand your horizon. It creates a better worldview as well. You know, so that you can engage in any sort of conversations in an intellectual way with some mathematical depth about what you are speaking. So you're driving yourself, and the more you learn, the better you are in terms of, you know, intellectual conversations.
Right.
But the thing is, from a young man, I think, I was always intrigued by things that are complex.
Okay.
My dad worked in the power station, and I would go down to the station and be intrigued by, you know, the enormity of it.
Okay.
How do you control these entities, you know? So the curiosity was always there.
Okay.
So I knew that I would have amassed a great body of work by the time I get to 100. I'm almost there. It's funny, but my mom just died at 100 years old.
Okay.
On January the 1st. No, actually, January 1st, 2008.
Okay.
I was the last person to see her. And she knew, ever since I was little, she knew my passion for reading and for writing. And I thought, having seen her on the eve of her death, it was almost like her passing on, you know,
Everything.
this longevity.
Yes.
I'm just hoping somehow by some mystery that is what it means, because I have a lot to do. I have a lot to accomplish yet. I have some incredible things I'd like to do. And, you know, in the ad you have the 4-phase life of Errol Gibbs.
Yes.
Well, I am using this as a pivotal moment to say the 5th phase begins today.
It begins today.
Yeah, so
All right.
we're in a wonderful position right now.
Excellent, excellent. So, you know, before we get into the 5th phase, let's talk about, of course, the first phase,
Right.
as information was passed on to myself, right? Let's speak in regards to family. Now, you speak, of course, generally in regards to your parents. How have they now been instrumental now in fostering this curiosity that you had from a child?
Well, it mostly came from my dad,
Okay.
because my mom was a homemaker. And my dad was a very interesting fellow.
Okay.
He was a member of I would say, the British elite, or he hung out, if you want to call it that, with the British aristocratic folks in Trinidad.
Right.
He even met the Duke of Edinburgh
Okay.
when they established the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. But he was a person that we were curious about too, because when you're young and back in the Caribbean, I mean, life is, you're almost living in a bubble, and you can't see outside of that bubble. But
Right.
he was the window to the world, because you could sit with him and talk to him about things that are happening beyond our shores.
Okay.
So all of that was created as curiosity, curiosity in me, actually. I know he was involved in, he was a pseudo engineer, if you want to call it that, a polytechnical type engineer like myself.
Okay.
And he was interested in doing things. He worked with the British engineers and they set up a technical school.
Okay.
So we know he was always involved
In something.
In something.
Yeah.
And someday, at some point, we may all get involved in it in some way. The boys, of course.
Right.
And I think that is what was the gateway to where I am or who I am today. Is I got involved ultimately with the school that he had, the technical school that they had engineered at the power plant.
Okay.
I became a part of it when I was a teenager, about 16 and a half, 17 years old.
Okay.
And that led to an incredible career, learning and understanding the things I was curious about when I was, let's say, 11, 12, 13, now became a reality for me because I was now transported into that environment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started to learn and understand. I remember, and this is the truth, I remember when I started, entered the school, a couple of years after, I gained a curiosity on the actual, how do you actually control these entities?
Okay.
Now, we know it was technology of some sort, not like today, of course, it's much more advanced.
Right.
So in that time, I wanted to know, but I did not have the technical expertise or the knowledge or whatever. But I knew that it has to be documented in places so for it to be consistent. I got a book. It was about 972 pages long.
972 pages.
Yes. It was written by about 72 scientists and engineers of all description.
Okay.
And the book really chronologized how do you manage a power plant.
Really?
No, not that I understood any of it. Not that I understood any of it, but believe you me, I just delved into it,
Right.
trying to understand, well, not that I could understand, but trying to get some grasp of what this all means. But by some mysterious way, I ended up in instrumentation and controls.
Really?
Which is actually how do you control,
the
manage
entity?
a power plant.
Yes.
And learned everything from, how we manage the chemical composition of all the different fluids on the plant.
Okay.
Understanding the temperatures and the great superheaters and the turbines that, run at 3,000 degrees C.
Right.
Superheated steam and all that stuff. I become so interested in that stuff that if I don't want to jump forward into the second phase, but this led me into your power generation.
Okay.
This knowledge. Of course, it would be a natural transition, I would imagine.
Right.
Like if you
coming from that background, right?
From that background.
Right.
But I was encouraged to stay actually in Trinidad.
Okay.
Stay and try to pass on knowledge and try to work with the young batch of students who are coming in.
Right.
Like every 2.5 years, they would bring in a new batch of students. Only 35 boys at a time.
Okay.
And this was a highly elite technical trades and technical school. And I got in not because I was brilliant or anything. It's primarily because my dad, being the founder or one of the founders,
Right.
we had immediate access to all of his boys when they got to 16.5 years old.
Wow.
So that was quite, it was quite interesting. He died when I was 13 years old.
Okay.
And that really changed my path because had he not died, I would have taken the path of university.
Okay.
And I'm glad we took this alternate path because today, when you look at the great manufacturing powers of the world, polytechnical education is at the peak, is at the apex, because that's where you design things, you understand how things work.
Right.
Yeah, that, even if you go to places like NASA, it's the technologists, the technicians,
Right.
the polytechnical engineers, they are really quite vital in a lot of the engineering experimentation we see going on in the world. I was glad I got into that area because it's also very profitable. Because these are real skills.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you look at it, right?
That's right.
Plus, there's a lot of responsibility.
These are the
as well.
hard sciences.
Yes.
The social sciences or the soft sciences are like sociology and psychology and psychiatry.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we want to fly we want planes to take us across continents.
Right.
All right.
We want to get there faster.
That's right. We want
Right.
to drive cars. We want digital technology of all description. So the hard sciences is where I would encourage a lot of our young men to put the focus, right?
As you said, especially with the hard sciences, There now we can see, of course, the new generation who are slowly getting into the hard sciences. What would you say the biggest encouragement or what biggest advice of encouragement you can have now for young men and women who now want to go ahead and pursue a career in the hard sciences?
Well, I would say you have to looking at trends as the first thing because even though you may know a particular areas to go in, you still have to look at the trends and how things are evolving.
Okay.
So even when we think of the hard sciences, we also have to think of AI, which is artificial intelligence.
Right, which is ever growing.
You see where that is going. Logistics is big. So, for instance, you have a lot of the big manufacturing plants. They bring in not so much the plant technologies here, but they bring in a lot of the warehousing. Okay, and that requires a lot of logistics. It's all around the world. All of the automobile companies, they are working in an integrated fashion with machine tool companies all over the world. So logistics is a big part of it. So it's really trying to understand the trends, what is happening. I would say even nuclear plants have a higher probability of building a nuclear plant than a thermal plant, which is coal-fired or oil-fired plant, fossil fuel actually.
Okay.
So understanding all of these trends. So it's not so much I want to get into technology or I want to get into the hard sciences, but understanding, which areas. And of course, like you said, they're very profitable areas, and not only that, they give you a real sense of duty, a sense of responsibility. It gives you a sense of purpose because you can see things are actually happening.
Right.
I mean, you think of a programmer who writes a program, or anyone in those fields. Like if you're doing an experimentation on an automobile, just to see it, on the track, that gives you a great sense of purpose. I would never be one to get into the soft sciences, although I'm sort of in it now in a way, when I say not in a scientific way.
Right.
But I'm in a way mostly through observation. That's what a lot of my work is actually using the world as my laboratory.
Okay.
And doing a lot of observation. We have traveled some, and we try to understand, people's behavior, again, strictly by, and I don't want the scientific minds to go crazy on me. We do it strictly by observation.
Right.
We talk to people, we share, I use my expertise coming out of my technical background in creating models for doing assessments and all that.
Okay.
Okay, so it is real because I'm replicating the same sort of expertise that I had when I worked in some of these environments. So I'm involved in it a little bit. I wouldn't say a little bit. In fact, the rest of my life is devoted to understanding human behavior and understanding happiness, which is now the big thing we're working with, is trying to understand the complexity and how it's multi-layered. And a lot of folks write about things like, almost as though there's a silver bullet, but I think we are coming to understand there's no such thing. It's very complex,
it is
very
complex.
multi-layered. Yeah.
For sure, right? Because, what defines happiness for someone could be a different definition for another person.
Yeah, well, we have tried to find a way to sort of normalize the way we look at. We are trying to actually change the narrative.
Okay.
To a great extent, that's what we're trying to do. And to do that, you have to come up with something that's common to the way a lot of people might think and behave. And we're doing that through what we call 10 key happiness indicators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you mind elaborating just a little bit on the 10 key? Give us a few, just before we get out of the break.
Okay, all right. Well, what we have looked at is two things we looked at. Happiness is both in the spiritual and the natural.
Okay.
That's where we begin the work on happiness. In the natural, of course, we are driven by events, big events, whether it's the marriage or you go on vacation somewhere or you're purchasing, things that give you pleasure. So that's the natural. But in the spiritual, we have joy, and happiness is comprehended in joy. Joy is not essentially comprehended in happiness.
Okay.
So the highest imperative is joy. And I might say joy is the sentinel that guards the soul when happiness takes flight.
Okay.
So the question is, if we lose, and in many cases, people who lose those material things, your job, or you get a catastrophic health problem or something, and we tend to go into sometimes fear, anxiety, perhaps depression,
Right.
perhaps even suicide. And we have friends,
But-
not friends,
yes,
but,
but
but
those
we know
times,
of
yes.
folks who have who are very wealthy.
Yes.
And one of the things we did find is that it appears as though the people who are wealthy, maybe it's, I notice the differential between having a lot and not having much, but they seem to be much more higher propensity, let's say, for bringing harm to themselves. Although we see a lot of it too in people at the lower end of, if you want to call it that, of the social ladder in terms of economics and all that.
Right.
But it's a different dynamics in why they might hurt themselves or take drugs or whatever.
Right.
That's like a coping mechanism.
Right.
It seems like the wealthier people, it's almost like a zero-sum game. It's either I'm wealthy and I stay wealthy,
Right.
or
Or
if something goes bump in the night, I'm going to jump. You know?
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, and that is the thing that we are trying to do with our work. So when you look at happiness, you'll find that people are happy today and miserable tomorrow, happy the next day, miserable, and it all has to do, it's almost like a rolling wave. So what we are attempting to do is present a way of looking at happiness where you rise to a certain level through, of course, understanding how we develop the index. You rise to a certain level, and you get to that level, and it modulates. So your unhappiness modulates rather than you drop. Right? So it modulates. So there's a whole bunch of strategies you can use to keep you at that level.
That level.
And it's quite interesting because when I worked in the power industry, we had a similar parallel. It's so interesting that if something was about to go wrong in the plant, you have controllers that would just peak, and what it means is that it would inject, whether it's fuel or whatever, and then it would goes from what they call derivative to integral action.
So basically a
And the
balance.
integral action is now modulated.
Right.
So you don't have, and it's the same idea I brought to this question of happiness.
Right.
How do we react positively to something that's happening, and rather than, you drop down to like a zero-sum game, you
Right.
fall down to a place where it could become dangerous even.
Right.
Because in many cases, like you say, it could be no return.
Yes.
So how do you avoid that happening? And that's the key. The other thing that we bring to the narrative on happiness or the discourse on happiness is that when we look at a lot of the models around the world, what we see are what we call top-down models.
Okay.
But our model is a bottom-up model, meaning that the happiness of a nation is the aggregate of the happiness of its people.
Right.
But most of the global studies, they tend to look at what the nation affords the individual.
Right.
But how do you know that I am surviving well in that ecosystem that you created? Well, the only way you'll know is you have to measure at this level.
Pretty much a
Well,
benchmark.
well, virtually at all levels, but particularly, I think, at a level where we tend to not pay as much attention to what is happening in our society, because we're becoming a fairly economically lopsided society.
Right.
And people are falling off the deep ends or cracks in the, I've never seen one of the cracks, but I heard about these cracks. How do you call it again? Cracks in the
Cracks in the sidewalk.
society or something like that.
Yes.
And it's not to make light of it, but I despise hearing such statements that people fell through the cracks. Which cracks are they falling through?
Right.
If we engineer a good society, no one will fall through any cracks. Okay? And that is what we believe, that happiness has the highest potency for transforming lives, transforming families, communities, even nations. It has the highest potency. We have looked at the attributes of happiness compared to the attributes of leadership and politics, the way we see it unfolding today. And we believe, if you go on our website, we do have a position paper that we have written. And the paper, one that encourages all nations to implement a ministry of happiness and a minister of happiness.
Okay.
And we have literally kind of write the manifesto for that.
Right.
And right now we are shopping around for either an organization, maybe a university, a philanthropist, anyone who could work with us to develop this whole methodology that we are working on. We also want to do an app so that people can actually fill out the questionnaire.
Right.
And that is, you asked me at the beginning about the 10 key happiness indicators. Well, actually, they are there are things like your career, education, it's health, it's humility, it's personality, self-esteem. You know, it's 10 of those indicators. And we have 10 questions per each indicator.
Okay.
And these questions, you have a score. And it's based on, it's all based on, I would say, in order to avoid the abstractness, it's almost like a zero-sum game. So if I ask you a question, if you're answering a question and it says, do you have a good relationship with your mother?
Okay.
It's either 0 or 10 points. Otherwise, it's ambiguous.
I can understand that. All right. So what we'll do is we're going to cut you right there because, you know, we're going to have to go and pay some bills.
Sure.
No worries. We'll come right back to, of course, to Here to Help You.
Okay.
IR Dave Rankin. This is my friend there, Mr. Errol Gibbs. We'll see you soon.
Welcome to Shadow Auto.
Welcome back here to Help You. IR Dave Rankin alongside the elder Errol Gibbs. You know, and we're having a fascinating conversation, especially in regards to, of course, some of the things that you've already accomplished, and of course, some of the things that you're looking to continue to do with of course, with the rest of your life, right? And I know just before the break, we were getting into, of course, you know what, you looking for members of society to go ahead and come on board. Right. How has the search been? How difficult has it been thus far in regards to finding someone to come on board? Right. And more importantly, the people who you have approached, what was their responses been like so far?
Okay, good. So that's a good question because we have talked to several people in pretty high places, and one of the disadvantages that occurs in these kinds of discussions is that we are not an entity because we are individuals.
Right.
That is the problem.
Right.
Because I've spoken to a happiness initiative at Berkeley University in California.
Okay.
I've spoken directly to the team that developed the Planet Happiness Index. He's now pointed me to the team that completed the Global Happiness Index.
Okay.
I have had talks with mostly email conversation, but I have some talks with the consulate at the United Arab Emirates, because I might say right now that they have installed the Ministry of Happiness and the Minister of Happiness.
Okay.
And it's quite coincidental because I'm not saying that they took our concept by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
All I knew is that we had made a contact, and probably about a year later or so, we came upon this Ministry of Happiness and Minister of Happiness. A young Muslim lady was put in place. I thought it was absolutely incredible.
Right.
But for me, I have made many attempts of saying, we have to go back and have some discussions with them, which we will do at some point.
Right.
Okay? We also contacted Bhutan in the Himalayas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like I said, we have talked to folks. Bhutan in the Himalayas, and they again, our work parallels. And if you could look at our work and put a timestamp on the work, you'll see that we had already completed our work before we even knew that these people existed and they were doing what they were doing.
Right.
So that is crystal clear.
Yeah.
We have no problem with that. In fact, our first model was developed in the year 2000.
Okay.
So that's long before maybe any of these countries may have. I don't know, but I know Bhutan have always is that type of country.
Okay.
You know, they move towards more, I wouldn't say egalitarian, but in terms of this society is not, I wouldn't even call it democratic either, because the models are different.
Right.
But it's very peaceful society, and you know, with nature and people and inwardly looking and all that stuff. So it was purely by accident, to be honest, that we came upon the studies in Bhutan and also in the United Arab Emirates. So when we contacted Bhutan, there was a lady here locally in Toronto, and she thought perhaps we were looking to get involved in some of the lectures and teachings. But no, we are really asking for a collaboration so we could do our Global Happiness Index
Okay.
in a different, using different models,
Right.
based on our 10 key happiness indicators.
Mm.
And who else have we talked to? I have spoken briefly to the Women's Federation for World Peace because I do some work with them.
Okay.
But they're on a different path than us. We are proposing to make a pitch to Global Affairs Canada
Okay.
because they will support projects that have great human value and it reaches out even beyond our shores. So we haven't done that yet. But in the meantime, what I had done, we suspended our website or the work that I was doing. Like every month, I would write a blog on the first of the month, and I would write an article.
Okay.
And the reason why I would do this is the blog was about happiness, and the article was looking at the real world phenomena. So in other words, if you read our work on happiness, we are not painting any unrealistic picture because
Right.
we're also telling you this is what the real world phenomena is.
Correct.
Okay, and
Yeah.
we are really writing at a very deep and intense level.
Yes.
Both on happiness. But the work that we are doing on happiness, we have something like called the 5 pathways of happiness.
Okay.
Which is your spiritual, moral, social, intellectual, and physical. In fact, that underpins the work we have done on 5 foundations of human development. In other words, we argue that in order to truly actualize ourselves as human beings, we should grow on 5 planes. Spiritual, moral, social, intellectual, and physical. We also believe that education must be founded upon those 5 foundations as well.
Foundations, yes.
Yeah, that's right. If you leave anyone out, we would have what we have today.
Right.
We have an education system that is somewhat incapacitated. It does provide us a good material life because
Right.
it is based on more our material existence more
Right.
than our spiritual or moral or social existence.
Correct.
And the evidence is clear when you look around the world, when you look at the growth of the prison industrial complex or the military industrial complex.
Right.
Then we know something is going wrong.
Yes.
Well, I attribute it, and a lot of the people I have talked to, we attribute it to the type of education. Yeah. So we give them a plus, 10 plus when it comes to developing, when it comes to the material accomplishments, then if you want to look at it. Because when you look around the world and you look at the achievements of humankind, we see some of the biggest achievements, in science and technology,
Right.
which is again providing material things to make us not only happy but more effective, more efficient, and all
Correct.
that. But we're losing out on the harmony that we should have. So,
Right.
in fact, I would say, when you look at the cost to correct the wrongs that we could have corrected through education, we really ain't making much gains. Because at the end of the day, what if we had a World War III?
You're right.
Right. So what we have is we actually created a deficit, but it does appear like as an asset, but we are really creating a deficit because at the end of the day, because we cannot engage in communication at a very high level, and we don't understand the oneness of humanity, and we have this disregard for human life, and I have to say it's a disregard because when you look at the growth of the prison industrial complex or the military industrial complex. When you look at pharmacological versus botanical, all of these are indicators that something is fundamentally wrong in what we are doing.
Right.
So yes, we give credit for the great scholars and the abilities to create a system of education where we could raise people to a certain level, but at the same time, we also created a phenomenal gap. So we need to step back and ask, what is education and what constitutes a good education.
Mm-hmm.
That is a difficult thing for the for the powers that be, or
True.
whoever the masters are, to sit back,
And
because
really
most of these
dive into that,
arguments
yeah.
would tend to come from ordinary people, and that's the big problem.
Right.
You know, like when I talk about, share, for instance, capitalism and socialism,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that they are at odds with each other for no good reason,
Right.
because they need each other.
Yes.
Okay. The problem, though, is that capitalism, although it's the engine of the modern economy,
Mm-hmm.
Capitalism, it's still. So I don't want to say it focuses more on the shareholders and doesn't take stakeholders as much as into consideration.
Right.
And that is where our work differs from a lot of other work, because we are concerned about the moral imperatives,
Mm-hmm.
because that is what gives us balance. That is what helps us to empathize with others. That is what would tend to, not take from the rich and give to the poor. I don't believe in those kinds of philosophies at all. When I talk about capitalism and socialism, I would like to see them sit at the same table and understand how do we build an equitable and a balanced society.
Right.
Not the socialists want to take from, no, that because I'm a hardworking person, all the
And
kids
you-
work hard, and
yes, and you
everybody
deserve-
who comes
of
around me,
course.
they work hard,
Yes.
so we understand that.
Right.
But I think the capitalists sometimes, or to a great extent, denies or denounces the important role of governments.
Mm.
And we hear these arguments about big governments and governments too big. Well, who would make such a statement when the welfare that we give to large corporations quadruples whatever, and whatever the people at the, if you want to call the lower rung of the ladder, goes right back into the economy.
Right.
Okay, so I don't know how people make such arguments. Research and development funding is huge, billions of dollars, could even be trillions of dollars. The prison industrial complex, it's all deficit financed.
Right.
Right, the military industrial complex.
Same thing.
Right?
Yes.
The world is spending $1.7 trillion in education, of the equivalent amount right now in the prison industrial complex and the military industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more deficit than an asset
Right.
to us.
Mm.
So it troubles me when we hear people at a very high level who we look up to for great leadership, and statements are made, and I don't know if it's intentional or if it's advertent or if these are just purely accidental statements that people make, but it hurts really,
Yeah, I can understand
because the inequities is going to destroy us. We need egalitarian societies,
that. For sure.
and that is not going to take anything away from the capitalists. It will create a more peaceful and a more viable society for everybody.
Wonderful. We're going to take a commercial break. We're going to be right back, of course. I'm got a wonderful conversation going on with the elder Errol Gibbs. We'll see you after the break. We're back here and here to help you. I are Dave Rankin alongside the elder Errol Gibbs. Just before the break, we were talking about, of course, how capitalism and socialism, how they need to go and work together. That brings me to a point in regards to, you recently gave a speech regarding repatriations.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, you know what? I guess one of the biggest questions I have right now,
Okay, go ahead.
right, is, are we ready? And more importantly, what would we do, if we were awarded? Could we handle something that, was, because there's a lot of responsibility
Yeah,
there,
for
right?
sure, for sure.
And given of course, your work now regarding, of course, the Global Happiness Index, right, which is once again another, of course,
Right.
responsibility of power, because to
Yeah.
be happy is a power within,
Yeah, of course.
right? So I mean, like, given all of that now, would we be ready? And of course, what, and by means, give us a take in regards to, of course, how well received your speech was at the time as well.
Okay, first of all, we did not get to do the presentation.
Okay.
But we have the transcript. I'm sending out the long form transcript.
Okay.
Since I didn't get to
Do it. Okay.
something happened, things were delayed, and we had to get back home for a reason that was important to us.
Mhm.
We didn't get. However, of all the things I've done in my life, I think the most complex is trying to understand this whole idea of who we are as the descendants of Black African slavery. And all of us, it doesn't matter where you are in the diaspora, whether it's the European diaspora, North American diaspora, or Caribbeans, South and Central America, what you call the Americas, wherever we are, this is a complex subject for us. Because, and the question always arises about who gets the money and how it will be divided and stuff like that. I say to everyone, that is not the place to start.
Okay.
Although that is a very important issue. Okay, and I'll come to that. But the place to start is there sufficient evidence, merits for legal and moral reparation for the things that have transpired over the last 400 years. In fact, today is 400 years. This year, actually, because it began in 1619.
Right.
Right, when the first 20 individuals or slaves actually were brought. Well, they weren't slaves, they were human beings or people. And they were brought to Virginia by the Dutch. So here we are, 12 million since then, and 2.5 million approximately who had died, killed, thrown overboard, eaten by sharks, whatever. It's a very terrible, terrible, terrible story to tell. I find it was very excruciating, looking at the numbers and what has transpired and the displacement of human beings. But at the end of the day, the question is still, do we deserve reparation? Should there be reparation? Do we have a strong enough moral and legal arguments? Now, for me, I always say the moral argument comes before the legal argument.
Right.
I believe that when it comes to great powers, legal arguments are good, but they have more legal power. And I'm not saying we should be afraid of legal power, but I would always rather have these issues start as moral issues, because then you get the world involved in it in a different way than if it's purely legal where you end up in a court. So that's where I believe it starts. I believe we should look at precedents. Are there any precedents? Now, should we be running out saying we should get reparation just because we feel we should get reparation? I would even say, okay, I wouldn't even bring that argument. I said, are there precedents? When you look at World War I and World War II, there was a Marshall Plan for Japan and for Europe and for reconstruction. Germany, imagine, Germany, who was one of our biggest problems, got also involved in the reconstruction. And both Japan and Germany became two of the biggest manufacturing powers. So and these, we could call them so-called enemies if you want to call it that. But yet there was reparation for the harm that was done. Right? So the reconstruction was rebuilt Europe, rebuilt Japan, built Germany. Israel, of course, had to be given reparation for the harm that was brought to them. by extermination. Not only does the government get reparation, but individuals are given reparation. Same thing with the Japanese. Even the internment, people are given reparation. There's a commission in the United Nations called the Compensation Commission.
Yes.
And they afforded Kuwait $90 billion.
$90 billion.
For the hand that was brought to them.
By Iraq.
By Iraq,
Oh,
the
wow.
invasion of Iraq.
Oh, wow.
So everywhere we look, we see people, nations rightfully receiving reparation. I believe in my moral argument is that reparation is in our DNA. You learn that as kids. You take something away from a kid,
Yes.
you may even get a beating and reparation to it. So I believe that there has to be acknowledgement, there has to be atonement, there has to be reparation because it's due, because the precedents are set. I worked with a gentleman in OPG. This was a young Japanese fellow, and he got reparation. This was, I think it was in the 70s or 80s. He got reparation, and nothing to do with, remember they keep saying that we are these descendants and the taxpayers.
That's
and
right.
all this stuff. And he got reparation. He went out and he bought a Corvette. So he got reparation. Now, it is in the DNA, but whenever it comes to black people or black slavery, somehow it gets metamorphosized to a question of race and color. I mean, and those are the facts.
Right.
It just metamorphosized our DNA somehow into a question of race and color.
Right.
Because if we use the same justification as everyone who has suffered atrocities in the world, there will be no question. No question. And I have written much on this subject, and I would like to publish all that I've written on this subject, and people will see that that there is no argument, there is no good moral argument against it. Right? Now, the question of division is not even an argument, because it's a question of we have enough data, enough historical data to understand the movement of African peoples from the West Coast to all the various colonies. I mean, that is so well quantified by historians in the United States that it's amazing.
Right.
So we have that data. So if we want to think about proportionality or anything like that.
Correct.
The other thing about reparation, it's not just a question of dollars. Although a researcher in Connecticut University, he came up with a figure of $5.9 trillion, and that is just for 98 years of labor.
Okay.
We are not talking about 244 years of labor.
Right.
And he did not even comprehend all of the colonies.
Right.
He was simply talking about on the U.S. plantations.
Correct.
And he said $5.9 trillion.
Wow.
So the true aggregate could be about $15 trillion.
Right.
Okay, but I mean, of course, we should probably, just like these great lawyers, they go out there and they'll ask for, because when you consider the labor, that is only one part of it.
Correct.
What about racial terrorism?
Yes.
So people are not taking the time. I don't care if you're good or you're bad or you're different. I say, roll up your moral sleeves and come to the table in fairness and justice and talk about the issues.
Right.
If you can demonstrate that there is no justification, then that's fine.
Right.
But who can when we already have precedent? And the question of labor is only one element of it. And most of the times we hear the talks about free labor, but free labor is only one aspect of it.
Correct.
What about the lives of 2.5 million people, and some estimates are much greater.
Much greater, yes.
But what about the lives of 2.5 million? What about 1863? We signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, January the 1st. 100 years later was the enactment of the Civil Rights Laws.
Right.
So even after slavery was deemed to be ended, you had 100 years of what? Explain what that 100 years meant. What does that 100 years mean?
Correct.
In terms of racial terrorism. Okay. So if we ever sat down as human beings who understand that we are all Africans to begin with, anyway.
Right.
Okay. So we are not giving reparation to some strange people. Okay. And I think, honestly, that's why I like the moral arguments long before the legal arguments.
Yes.
Because the moral argument with that fellow on the other side is my brother.
Yes. For
So
sure.
why am I having such a problem to doing good? Now, it is so interesting that slaves were baptized before they were put on these ships by Jesuits and Dominicans, Franciscan monks, whatever. And this was the 17th century. That the idea that you were putting people who were baptized into Christianity on the ships, it's an indictment right there. It's a moral indictment on the whole world or all who perpetrated this act. And when you go to Galatians, I think it's 6:10, it says clearly, and to me that's my best scripture of all the scriptures on the even the Ten Commandments. Do good to all, and in particular, those who are of the household of faith. If that isn't the greatest condemnation on us, I don't know what is. Okay? Do good to all, right? And in particular, those who have the household of faith.
Yes.
So when you were baptized as slaves in the 17th century, you were actually indicting yourself as human beings on this planet. And I don't know what the ultimate end would be, but I think we have time still for atonement and, and admission of guilt. And I think that's the fear, is if we acknowledge that there was a wrong, then it becomes a legal argument. So as long as we keep it a vaguely legal or vaguely moral or whatever, I think then everyone is in
I got it.
in good hands.
No worries. So we are going to wrap this up. We got to continue this conversation once again, for sure. Just before we go ahead and of course, our segment today, go ahead and inform the people where they can go ahead and find you, right? So that way, in the event, of course, they may have some questions for you or want to go ahead and reach out to you.
I'll send them to my website, I think. Their website is www.gibbshappinessindex.com. That's a good place to start because you'll see some of my work there. I also write in a slightly different genre for Caribbean Current. So if you write Errol Gibbs Caribbean Current, my work will come up.
Wonderful.
And
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time and, of course, and taking in this wonderful conversation with our elder Errol Gibbs. Thank you, Joe, for coming in today. Like I said, we have to take this. We have to do this again, for sure. And hopefully someone will come in as well. So because there's a little bit more of a balance in regards to having a female perspective as well.
Yeah, I would like personally everything I say, everything I write, it's open to scrutiny, and I'm happy to be challenged by anything that I've written because I try to write very balanced from an objective standpoint. I do write sometimes from the Christian worldview, but it does challenge this whole concept, and it also challenges democracy.
Wonderful.
Are we truly achieving the noble goals of democracy?
Beautiful. We'll see y'all next week, everybody. Peace and love, family.